Hello, and welcome to the BCN and Friends podcast, where we have real conversations about learning, leadership, and the lived experiences of nurses and healthcare professionals across the emergency spectrum. Each episode, we sit down with thought leaders, BCN certification holders, and industry experts who share their stories, their insights, and the challenges that shape their work. Our mission is simple: to amplify the voices of those making a difference every day, because your experiences drive progress, inspire others, and shape the future of nursing. We're here to honor that in every episode. Sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always valuable. This is BCN and Friends, and we're so glad you're here.
In this episode, we're joined by Nyssa Hattaway, an emergency, transport nurse, educator, and former art major who brings creativity to the profession of nursing. Nyssa joins us to talk about compassion in high-stakes care and what it means to show up fully, whether that's at the bedside, in research, or in finding your voice as a nurse. This episode is called Be Colorful in a World of Beige: Compassion and Creativity in Nursing.
I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCN and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dexter, our Director of Professional Development. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Holly.
In this episode, we're joined by Nyssa Hattaway. It's always a fun time to have a fellow podcast host with us and flip the script to a guest perspective. So, Michael, could you please introduce us to our BCN friend, Nyssa?
Yeah, absolutely. Nyssa began her nursing career in a level 1 trauma center, growing into roles as preceptor, charge nurse, and department educator before transitioning to flight nursing, where she served the South Atlanta area for over a decade. She's a preceptor, a principal investigator on research focused on family presence, and a co-host of both her company's educational podcast, Amped, and the emergency nursing podcast, The Q Word. Nyssa is also a frequent national speaker and serves on the Exam Construction Review Committee for the CFRN and CTRN exams. Nyssa, we're excited to have you with us today. Welcome to the BCN and Friends podcast.
So much. I love the Board of Certification for Emergency Nursing, what you guys do.
Well, we love having you as a part of it. And I am looking forward to chatting with you, getting to know more about you, because our paths actually do not cross much at all with the things that you do and the things that we do here. So looking forward to it. I'll let Holly kick it off.
For you personally, what originally drew you into nursing? And then how did kind of your career journey evolve from your early days starting out and then to your current role?
So I'm one of the people who came to nursing later. It was the second career for me. I actually have a bachelor's degree in art history. And I loved studying art, and I'm still super passionate about art. And it does occasionally overlap with nursing, actually. But I was involved, and my family was involved in a really bad car accident. And my baby, who was 7 months old, was pretty severely injured. And he ended up in the pediatric intensive care unit and had some very big surgery. And I watched the healthcare workers help him, and I watched his body heal. And in the end, it was a very good. He was healed completely. He was able to do all activities. He's a big, healthy, strong, grown man now, and we had a really great outcome. And as I sat through that experience and went through that whole process, I realized that the human body is amazing and that I wanted to be a part of healthcare. And that's when I decided to go to nursing as a second career. So I was in my 30s when I went to nursing school. And I went to nursing school with the idea that I was going to be a labor and delivery nurse, 100% going to L&D, no questions asked, all the way to the second semester of my senior year. I'm going to L&D. That's going to be my thing. And I ended up with my practicum in the ER. And after a few shifts down there, I was like, hold on, wait a minute. What is this place? This was back when we wore white head to toe, and I had white shoes on. And I remember being in the trauma bay and someone else's blood got on my white shoes. And I was like, that's it. This is the place for me. And so like, it was kind of a spontaneous decision. And I went to the emergency department and absolutely loved it. And then, I did progress through the different roles and became the department-based educator. And part of my role in that was to educate all new hires and all of our employees annually on helipad safety training. And so I knew a little bit about the helipad and about receiving patients from helicopters. And one of the things that I would offer our staff is like, hey, these companies will do a third ride if you guys are ever interested in seeing how they do what they do. And after some years of giving that spiel, I was like, I wonder why I haven't ever done a third ride. So I did it. And once again, I was like, oh, this is my next move. My dad was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and so I grew up on army bases with helicopters everywhere, and he flew them, and they were in the sky around me all the time, and so it sort of felt like a natural fit, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Well, that's very interesting. I did not realize that that was the path. I just kind of assumed that you'd always wanted to go into the critical care emergency world. And I think for people that are in healthcare and that start a career in healthcare, it's often, a similar path of something they wanted to do. But it's also always interesting to hear when people went down one path and then changed and decided to go into healthcare and the reason why. So thank you for sharing that, Nisa. And since you've been in this career, in this crazy profession that we share with you, you've been doing a lot of focus on family presence during resuscitation. And so just out of curiosity, could you tell us why that is such a passion of yours and what really got you looking at that, in a different light, and then not only just looking at it, talking about it, but actually, involved in ways that we can change some of the culture around not allowing family in during resuscitation?
Yeah, I actually was attending an emergency nursing association meeting, and we had a palliative care counselor coming in, and she sort of threw the gauntlet down and said, "Why are you guys not doing this? This is something that has been proven and is evidence-based." And that those are magic words to me. And so I kind of, and I was in the educator role at the time. And luckily, I worked for a magnet hospital that was very, very supportive of nursing. And so I knew that if I brought this initiative and this research, that there were pathways that I could go to develop a policy and then a project. And I did receive that support, multidisciplinary support on that. So, you need respiratory therapy, you need physicians, you need chaplains, you need non-clinical personnel, of course, you need nursing. So then when we started practicing family presence and I saw the difference in running resuscitations and running codes with and without it, I really became a believer. And so it was probably a year or so into that where just sort of the fates would have it, where my best friend had a terrible chronic condition. She called me one night and said, "I don't feel good. I need to know if this is bad enough to go to the emergency room." And I said, "Absolutely, you need to go." And 6 or 7 hours later, her husband was calling me saying they're intubating her. She's taken a turn for the worse. I couldn't believe it. And so I got in my car and drove several hours to this hospital, to her bedside. And within a few hours of me getting there, she coded. And when I got there, I knew it was very, very grim. And that this was likely going to be how this was going to go. Of course, I pumped all the nurses for information about, her labs and what they had done and what they'd seen and what meds was she on, and trying to think of the thing that they hadn't thought of, and there wasn't any. And I was actually at the bedside when she coded and yelled for the nurse to come in. And this was a facility that didn't practice family presence. And so the first thing they wanted to do was send me out of the room. And I told them I wasn't going to step out. I was going to stay right there. If these were my best friend in the whole world's last few moments, I wanted to be with her during that time. They, I think, were pretty uncomfortable with that. I mean, I was crying. I was very upset. I wasn't getting in the way. I wasn't loud. I wasn't interrupting anything. But it does invoke strong emotions. And so when I went through that experience with her, it went from being something that I thought was a really good idea and an evidence-based practice and something that I wanted in my department to my absolute kind of lifelong passion. So they did let me stay, and now I kind of do it because I know what it's like to be on the other side of the stretcher as well.
I have a couple questions behind that, just to follow up, and thank you for sharing that story as well. And when you talk about family presence during resuscitation, is that really what your focus is mostly on, is the cardiac resuscitation? Because there's also whole components of, well, there's a trauma resuscitation, there's blood administration and MTP, and there's different types of quote unquote resuscitation. So what is it, mostly CPR that we're talking about, or other components as well?
Yeah, super great question. Thanks for asking that. It is definitely during a code blue scenario, with the idea being that if this is your loved one's last few moments, I mean, obviously we have a lot of very successful code blues. Luckily, some of them, we are able to resuscitate them, but many of them are not going to go that way. And the idea is that families want to be there for those last moments. We know how important it is at birth. We bring family members in, caregivers, support people, dads, they're expected to be there, even when it's not going well, even when it's in the operating room under emergent situations. We allow family to be there because we know those first few moments of life are so key for the family unit. And what we're saying is that those last few moments are as important as well. The trauma bay is a great place to bring family in for several reasons. One is because those are mostly successful. So those are really good outcomes typically. And two, because when you get the call that grandpa at the nursing home is coding and you need to come, or is near coding and you need to come, somewhere in your back of your mind, you have considered that before. But traumas happen on a second. And it takes a long time for family to wrap their heads around what just happened to their family member in this MVC or this fall or this whatever it is. So if they can come in at the beginning and start absorbing and understanding this new thing that has happened to them, it really helps in the process of that healing.
And Nyssa, you have, obviously a lot of emergency experience, but you also have a lot of flight experience, and you chair this committee that reviews items for people that are going to become certified transport nurses and certified flight nurses. And so how does that translate into the, transport environment? Because that is in some ways a very different environment, especially in an aircraft when you have a coding patient and then you're talking about family presence. So can you speak to it a little bit from the transport side too?
Absolutely. And that's kind of where we have mounds and mounds and mounds of evidence about how it should go in the ER, in the ICU, in the hospital setting. There's almost none about the transport or flight setting. And so that's what we're trying to work on right now. There are some really key differences with bringing family into an aircraft or even an ambulance. One of the key components to family presence is that it is offered to the families. There are many families who will say, no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. And that's perfectly fine. And we support them in the quiet room or the consultation room as we always would. But the key is to offer it. Another very key component to family presence is having a family representative, someone who is a member of the code team that is dedicated only to the family. They're not doing compressions. They're not running to get meds. They're not scribing. They are dedicated only to narrating what's going on to the family and attending to any of their needs. And that could look like answering questions, getting tissues, water, a seat, making phone calls for them. And sometimes families accept the invitation to come to the bedside for the resuscitation. And when they get in there, it's too much for them or it's too upsetting for them. And so they need to step out. The transport environment, that's not an option. Once we lift on the helicopter, we are committed to taking this family member with us. So the screening process has to be a little bit different. There are some other factors that we have to screen for. So are you prone to motion sickness? Are you afraid of heights? Are you claustrophobic? The helicopter's very small. Ambulances are very small. And then also, will the weight of the parent or family member be too much for the helicopter? So helicopters they're pretty small and they're very weight dependent. And so sometimes it's not an option to invite them because adding their weight on will not allow for it. So those are factors that do not come into play in the hospital that we have to consider additionally in the transport environment. We do frequently and in some ways inconsistently take family members with us. And I have never known of a documented episode where it has gone badly or unsafely, but there are definitely additional considerations than what you would do on the ground.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Just listening to you talk, you've spoken about with a lot of confidence, I would say, about family presence during resuscitation. And you certainly have a very distinguished career in emergency medicine and flight. And so if there's somebody listening and they're perhaps wanting to start a change in their facility and they want to have family presence during resuscitation, or maybe they want to go into flight nursing, Regardless, how do they get past and how have you gotten past some of those questions of like, am I the right person for this? Am I really knowledgeable enough to do this? And what is often referred to as imposter syndrome of just the inabilities that we feel we have to start something new, to move into a new field, to initiate a new program in our workplace.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love talking about imposter syndrome because imposter syndrome is something that self-aware clinicians experience, and it is a experience of high achievers. So when you are looking at your practice and you're like, man, I'm really weak on ABGs, you know what I need to do is work on ABGs. I need to study this. I need to talk to some folks. I need to get some resources. I need to listen to some podcasts, and then I can strengthen myself in ABGs. What imposter syndrome does is it shows you that you're really smart, but you have weaknesses out there that you don't know about. And therefore, how do you combat them if you don't know what to dig into, what to research, what to study? Emergency nursing and flight nursing, I think, are particularly prone to it because we are responsible for cradle to the grave. We take care of everything, every diagnosis, every injury, every illness, from something super minor to full cardiac resuscitation. It's impossible to be an expert on all of those things. So we can be really prone to imposter syndrome. What we are experts on is handling emergency scenarios. We know airway, we know breathing, we know circulation. We know, in many cases, reassurance medicine. So when somebody comes in with chest pain, we assume it's a STEMI until proven otherwise. And then we go to the next most life-threatening and eliminate it, and so on until we can say, ma'am, sir, whatever, we don't know exactly what's going on, but it's not an emergency. Or you have costochondritis. I can reassure you that it is not a heart attack, and you can follow up with your primary care. A lot of what emergency nursing does is reassurance medicine. Those are the things that we are experts on. But we have this wide number of topics that could come across our patient population, and there's no way to be, savvy on all of those. So focusing on emergency, stabilization, those are the things that we are experts on. When you're combating imposter syndrome, one of the things is when you do recognize your weakness, or when you are preparing to start a new policy or speak at a conference or whatever, one of my favorite ways to combat imposter syndrome is to just over prepare, know it backwards, forwards, inside, out, with your notes, without your notes, all of those things. The next thing that I love to recommend for imposter syndrome, and we say this all the time about all sorts of things, is find yourself a mentor. Find someone who's an expert on this and have them take you under their wing and teach you everything that they know. This is the thing about mentors. If you find a really good one, a mentor is going to push you and challenge you and question you and hold you accountable. So in addition to having a mentor, you need to have a wing woman or a wingman. And that's the person whose job is not to push you, but just to hype you up and just to be there for your accomplishments. And I think you should have mentors and wingmen both inside of medicine and outside of medicine. So like my two besties are not nurses. And so when I explain some of the things that we do, they are often pretty amazed at it, and it brings it back into kind of perspective for me. So I love mentors. I also love wingmen.
Well, I will say this. I just think it's so cool to hear how your life and experience has fed into kind of all of the things that you're willing to bring to the profession of nursing and to the professionals in healthcare, to kind of talk from a place of like, look, this is things that I've actually experienced, have walked through. And this is what I would hope we would be able to do for each other, for every patient and every family that comes through the door. And so I'm here to be a part of the solution. I like people who can identify problems because we need those people. We need those people who can be like, that's not quite right. Sure. And I feel like most people can be that person. It takes an exceptional person to be like, hey, that's not quite right. And here's how we can solve that. Here's how we can work on that. Here's my suggestion for a solution, or at least like to get us moving in the right direction. So I love how you're not only a person who sees like, hey, we could do this better, but also you're willing to provide your insight from lived experience to help be a part of that solution. And I think that's just really such a unique and needed perspective. And also what a great challenge for people to find not only a mentor, because that everyone needs one, but then also to have those people who are just like, I don't know if you've heard this today, but you are amazing. What you do is hard and you do it well. Like everybody needs to hear that every now and again. So having that wing person, yeah, I could not agree with you more. So most nurses have never been on a podcast before. Like most nurses, the majority of nursing professionals have never been a guest on a podcast. And then that number slims down even more when you talk about people who actually host a podcast and are a nurse. Not only is Nyssa a host of one podcast, she's actually on two. So like you've like now you're in like a very, very slim amount of professional nurses who hold the title of dual podcast host. So you have one for education, emergency nursing. Obviously, we could go into like, why would you, which kind of got you into there? But I think even a bigger question, because communication is just so different and it's progressing, it's moving at such a rapid pace. There's just sometimes I feel like there's just information overload and communication in so many methods. It almost feels like you have to be really intentional and selective of what you allow in now. Whereas before, I think you had to go digging for things. So I guess twofold question is, what role do you see podcasts playing in modern nursing education? And then why do you think this format of podcasting really resonates with nurses and healthcare today?
I think that podcasting is super great for nursing education because science and research moves so quickly that by the time it's published in even a periodic journal, but definitely like a textbook or official online presence, it moves so quickly. So this is a great way to stay on the cutting edge. The other thing about podcasts is they can really be customized. You can be a very quiet kind of nerdy nurse. You can be a total trauma jock, adrenaline junkie, and everything in between. There's room for it in nursing. I would say there's even room for it in emergency nursing. And to that, you can find a podcast that matches your education style, a podcast that matches your attention span. You know, there are some that are 8 minutes, quick little sound bites. And then there are others that are long format, 2-hour in-depth educational, you know, really high brow stuff and everything in between. Our emergency nursing podcast is very informal. We try to keep it less than an hour because we know the attention span of our people. It's rated E because emergency nurses like to use some certain words as part of their coping mechanism. So my point is, you can find the format that fits you and your learning style, find the thing that is your passion or your weakness, and you can really use that. And so what we know is that nurses often have long commutes, and so they will listen to it on their way into work or on their way to decompressing home from work. They will listen to it at the gym when they're working out, which is the great coping mechanism for your physical body and also your mental health in this profession. And people listen to podcasts when they're cleaning. And so we get to be in your ears when you are doing these things. It's very customizable. And one other great thing is you can use podcasts now and get continuing ed contact hours. So I think it's definitely here to stay. This will go also for blogs and YouTube videos with demonstrations and things like that. All of those are great ways to augment the stuff that you're getting from your department, your scholarly journals, your professional organizations.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really cool to see how things have changed so much in the last few years. And it's interesting to know or to consider where it's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 years from now as well. And the availability of information, the free online education is just so powerful. And I appreciate you sharing that with everyone, because as a former ER educator, people came to me all the time. I just can't find anywhere to do this. I don't know where to get good CE. And I couldn't understand it because it's so prevalent and there's so many opportunities. And I think if for people that are seeking opportunity, there's a lot to be found. And one of the questions we like to ask everybody on this podcast is whether that there was a particular time in your career or a particular person that you look back on and you go, well, that really impacted who I am today, or that really changed what I've done. And you've, certainly already shared one example with us. And I'm sure there's many, many examples, but are there any other times in your career that you feel that a person or a moment significantly impacted who you are today and the passion, drive, determination that you have?
Yeah, so as you guessed, I would definitely say my friend Sharon that I went through that experience with. And one thing I will say, kind of circling back to your question, Holly, is when you decide to take on a project or you decide to take on a piece of research that you find interesting, you're going to be spending a lot of time and a lot of depth with it. And so you want to make sure that it's something you really feel strongly about, or not just something you think, yeah, that's probably a good idea, it's mediocre, whatever. This is something you're really, really going to spend a lot of time on. And I, for something about family presence clicked in me automatically. And then when I went through the experience with Sharon, it became my passion. And I knew that this was the thing that I was going to promote forever because of the personal experience that I had with her. And it is kind of her legacy and a way for me to like keep her in my life and make things better for other people. So I love that. I would say probably the other most influential person in my nursing career was one of my charge nurses and co-educators, and that is a woman named Donna Brannon. And I quote her all the time. I think about her all the time. If I could be her someday or be like her someday, that would be the goal. She's just very, very pro nursing, very, very pro her staff. She would go to bat for you, get in between a cardiothoracic surgeon and you, or a family member and you, teach you, be down to earth with you, chide you and check you if you needed it. And just super, super well loved lady. And if I could have the people skills that she has, I'd be really happy. I learned so many things from her. Like we were night shift and she would say like, hey, no matter what, morning is coming. Like no matter what, morning is coming. And then the only people who are not making mistakes are people who aren't working. So like you're going to make one. Just make sure it's not a deadly one. Just make sure it's a tiny one. Like we're human. So she taught me a lot of really important things that sound like cute sound bites, but are actually really big concepts that are important to wrap your head around.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing those. Those are great. I need to write a few of them down and maybe we can make some t-shirts or something. Morning.
Morning is coming.
It just, and Michael, you probably feel this way too, simply because working in a department for a period of time, before you know it, you're kind of asked to be like, hey, you've been here for a little bit. It's time to be a charge nurse, or it's time to precept people. You kind of trend towards that as you stay in any department for a period of time. And I always find it blows my mind a little bit when we ask this question and people say, hey, it was this charge nurse or it was this informal leader. Like you get the name charge nurse, but like it's not this big position shift or something like that. A lot of times you do it maybe one shift a week, or sometimes you do two. It's not this director level CEO person or CNO person that often seems to be the one that people gravitate towards. It's those charge nurses, it's those preceptors, it's those people on your unit who took the time to invest in you and make you, a part of the greatness of that unit, to say you're valuable and I want you to stay around. I want you to do a good job because I see in you the potential to be a great nurse or great in healthcare. And so I'm like, one department I worked in, I don't think I got a class. I got a phone call and it was like, hey, I know you might be one of the younger nurses, but nobody else wants to do it. So you're going to be in charge tonight when you come on shift. And I was like, okay. One facility I worked at, I did take a class. It was 4 hours. And I'm like, so for very little prep work, I was given the reins of a department. And I look at that and I go, these people who are making such a big impact, they're doing it because they just care so much and because they're willing to lead when maybe other people aren't. And they're willing to have tough conversations and stick up for people. Like there's just this whole thing that's happening. And I think not often with like a lot of training going into it, it's often happening with just the desire to do something and do it well. And so I don't know, I think you're making people very proud. And so I hope that they're listening and just are like, my girl, yeah, she's getting it. Well, thanks again for sharing that. Well, I get the chance to kind of shift the podcast a little bit to our rapid fire section, which I enjoy. The reason we ask these questions is because we just want to get to know you as a person and ask, honestly, we just need some really good recommendations for 2026 to kick off this year well. So one question for you is, what would you be doing if you were not in your current role? I know we kind of already talked about your art history, which Funny side note, one of my favorite doctors that I worked with, she was an art history major in her undergrad, and then she went to medical school. And I was like, we just always had some of the best conversations. So total side note, but I don't know if art's going to play a role in this response, but what would you do outside of nursing?
Outside of nursing, I think outside of nursing, if money was no object, I would be a yoga teacher or maybe like a park ranger. If I wasn't a flight or ER nurse, I would do burn ICU. I did like a little brief stint contract in a burn ICU, and it was the most complex, some of the sickest patients I've ever taken care of before. And I thought it was amazing. I still want to catch a baby, so I would love to try my hand at labor and delivery. And then I think being a nursing professor, like a nursing instructor, teaching new would-be nurses. I've done a little bit of clinical instructing and I loved it. So I would be pretty happy doing that.
Oh, I mean, I feel like you have time to do all of those. I'm not really sure what it takes to be a park ranger, but I feel like, you seem to be able to take on a lot of things. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you could be out in the park rangering and podcasting. I don't know. I see unlimited possibilities for you, Nyssa, but I also feel pretty strongly that you would be one of those really cool nursing professors who you could like have a real conversation with. So for the future of nursing, I hope that you get into that as well. So, all right, we're going to jump into your favorites and here we go. So do you have a favorite book and or quote or both that kind of inspires you?
So I gave you a couple of my favorite nursing quotes from Donna Brannon. Another quote that just kind of applies to life, or a couple of quotes that I've heard recently, was, "I'm colorful in a world full of beige." And I know lots of people who want to be part of the wallpaper. I don't. So those I kind of love a lot. And I mean literally colorful, like art and clothing, but I also mean like figuratively, like just living life to the fullest and seeing things, doing things, just living a colorful life. As far as books, I have 1,000 recommendations. One of them that I want to recommend that is not nursing specific, but I love so much, is called The Happiness Project. And it's by Gretchen Rubin. And her whole idea is just how can you make yourself like this much more happy in different categories. And then I love 1,000 Naked Strangers. It's by Kevin Hazard. He was a Grady medic, and Grady is the big hospital in Atlanta. So this is like literally a place I go all the time. And he is now full-time a book writer and journalist. So he's a very good writer. And he chronicles patients that you both would recognize. Everybody in paramedicine and emergency medicine would recognize these patients. And just really beautifully written and important observations that are made that you're just like, yeah, I've had that patient. I know that patient. I've taken care of that patient. His second book is called American Sirens, and it's about the origin of EMS in the United States. And it's amazing. And everybody in the emergency spectrum should read it. I love anything by Atul Gawande, but specifically the Checklist Manifesto. I think checklists in the emergency department are wildly underutilized, and we've got a lot of room that we could be using those for patient safety and high risk, low volume procedures that we do. Another one is When Breath Becomes Air. If you want to cry your eyeballs out, read that one. That's a book about a physician who gets a devastating diagnosis, and he is writing it from a physician's perspective, but the owner of the body that is going through this chronicling his own death. And then kind of a more fun one is called When Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. It's by Caitlin Doty, and she was a mortician and ran a crematorium, and she tells these wild stories about death and dying and the way we handle it in the United States and the way that other cultures handle it. And it's also a handful of anecdotal patients that you guys would recognize too. There's some common threads in that one that you will recognize. So that's a kind of a little bit of a fun one, but it is about death and dying. So I could give you probably 10 more if you if you wanted, but those are my faves. And also I have copies of all of those. So if anybody wants to borrow them, unlike you, Holly, I'm a super, super slow reader, and I make notes and I dog ear pages and I put Post-its on them. And The book is wrecked by the time I'm done, but you're welcome to borrow it if you want.
You could honestly, we could sit here and elongate this section of the podcast specifically just for me. I know you and I talked briefly about my goal for 2026 to read too many books. And so I am actively taking in recommendations. So I jotted down most of those. You and I can have a side conversation about some more, or we could just create a thread because I'm going to need all the inputs. And I truly enjoy reading books that just move me, give me information, give me perspective that maybe I didn't have before. I have read When Breath Becomes Air and 1,000 Naked Strangers. I've already read those and I was like, oh yeah, such good recommendations. Again, the style of writing may not always be the perfect fit for me. However, the perspective gain, I often find, I'm just really glad that I read that. And that's why, to me, books are they're the format that I really dig into. And for other people, it may be movies, TV show, it may be a podcast, it may be a radio station. All of those are fantastic if that's your thing. But for me, like, it's books, and I love to hear what other people are reading because I'm like, that's going on a list. I do have a list in my phone that I bring to my library when I go to my library. I know I am that person. I'm like, I'm wearing my library out, those librarians love me. But again, we could stay and we will. Like, just know this podcast is going to end. This recording is going to be over. And then Nyssa and I are going to have a little book moment after this. So sorry, y'all. Okay, but moving on. Favorite song, musical artist, or something that can just kind of move you?
Love this question. So something that happens on the helicopter, we do 24-hour shifts. And so frequently we fly at night and sometimes all night. And so at 2:00 in the morning, when we're flying back on a really long leg and we're all trying to stay awake, unfortunately for the pilot and the flight medic, I will start singing very badly into the mics in an effort to keep myself awake and entertained. And my last shift, I worked on New Year's Eve. And so we were singing Fireworks by Katy Perry and Party Like It's 1999 by Prince and anything that we could think of that was sort of New Year's themed. And that's how it goes. But I do love my 80s girls. I love Cyndi Lauper. I love Madonna. I love Prince. And my guilty pleasure song that's embarrassing, but that I will bop to every single time is Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus. So embarrassing. But how can you not get down to that?
It is very embarrassing that you would admit that on this podcast.
Sorry. But also,
I also be like, yeah, Party in the U.S. Yeah, I know. And it is an earworm. There's lots more that can identify with that. But once it gets started, like, you're not changing it. You are going to listen to it. So just everyone get together. And even though Nyssa's the one who admitted it, we all would listen to it with you. So there you have it. Okay. Well, Nyssa, you're doing lots of things. You keep a full work, life, personal, all of those things. So self-care is really important. I would love to one day be able to say that nurses and healthcare people in general do a great job of taking care of themselves and setting aside intentional time every day, every week to do something that helps them reset. We're not there yet, but we're going to keep talking about it. And so what is it for you? What does self-care mean for you? And what do you do that helps you reset and kind of get back to yourself?
Yeah, so you won't be surprised to know, based on like what my other careers would have been, I do love yoga. And I like all kinds of yoga, but particularly hot yoga and aerial yoga. And then I've gotten into this thing, and I'm not sure how it happened, but people will send me links to like weird, unique kinds of yoga. So like I've done capybara yoga, I've done puppy yoga, I've done yoga in the Georgia Aquarium, I've done stand-up paddleboard yoga. So like somehow this has kind of become my thing. Those are only like one-time deals, but they're super fun. The other thing that I do is I get outside, and I don't care if it's cold. I don't care if it's rainy. I don't care if it's 1,000,000 degrees. I go on a hike. I love hiking in the rain and in the mud, particularly with my dog, because we usually have the place to ourselves. Nobody else wants to go out there. Just put on some good clothes and get outside. So I love a good hike.
I have never heard of capybara yoga. I've heard of goat yoga, puppy yoga.
And goat yoga. Yep. Yeah.
But I'd never heard of that. So people are sending you not only the common kinds, but they're sending you the very unique kinds. I think it's really cool when people know, like, hey, my friend's kind of into this. Then, like, you find opportunities you weren't even looking for, and now you're doing yoga with puppies. I mean, that sounds
Up next is otter yoga and penguin yoga. So we'll see.
Oh my goodness. We're going to need a recap. I feel like people are going to want to follow you online, mostly for the follow-up for these upcoming experiences. But if our audience would want to follow you online, what social media platform or where can they reach out to you to get in touch with you, Nyssa?
Personally, I'm on Facebook and on Instagram. I don't post much on Instagram, mostly pictures of helicopters on Facebook, but you can find me on both of those places. And then for the podcast, you can email thekeywordpodcast@gmail.com, or you can check us out at thekeywordpodcast.com.
Awesome. I will post that in the blog for this episode. So thanks for sharing that.
I will say too that the Keyword podcast, we have episodes on the imposter syndrome and on family presence. And I also have an interview by the mentor charge nurse that I was talking about, Donna Brannon. So if any of those things interest you, you can find a little bit more in that.
Well, they all interest me. So I will have to definitely check that out and listen to them. And I can't say that I'll be listening to them while I do capybara yoga, but I will do what I can to listen to those. And I appreciate you sharing that with us, Nyssa. It's just been really nice chatting with you and the fun conversations, but also, the deeper conversations. I also wish that I could see a lot more progress on family presence during resuscitation and just looking at some of the ways that we can improve the profession and improve emergency medical care and encourage other nurses. I think there's just so many nuggets that you've shared today, and I really appreciate you taking the opportunity to chat with us and to share a lot of that with the nursing audience. So thank you so much for spending time with us today and for all that you do for this profession. It's been great.
Thank you. I do have a bibliography if someone's interested in that to start some research. I have a policy you can use that we will share to set up the process in your department. And I'd be happy to walk anybody through how to set up like an interdisciplinary committee. Any of those things I would be over the moon to help with.
Nyssa, the fact that you're offering to be even an available resource, that I think that just shows kind of the heart that you have for not only this passion project, but for nursing in general. And so, as Michael said, thank you for joining us for this episode of BC and Friends. You've really been a source of inspiration, not only for those interested in flight and transport nursing, but for nurses who are pushing the boundaries in how we communicate, we educate, and connect within our profession. We want to recognize the trailblazing work you're doing and let you know that your impact and the effort behind it does not go unnoticed. We're looking forward to some face-to-face time with Nyssa at BC and Learn Live in Vegas, July 21st through the 23rd, 2026. You can make plans to join us. You can go to bcn.org/BCNLearnLive to get tickets. You should come with us. And that's going to be a wrap for this episode of BC and Friends. Don't miss what's next. You can subscribe, share, and join the conversation by scanning the QR code for Learn updates in this episode blog. Got a topic you'd like us to cover? You can drop us a line at bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs with Michael Dexter, and we're proud to celebrate your dedication to nursing across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and we are out.